The post-Spanish-American War years had seen a small uptick in funding provided for the US Navy, so in addition to battleships, it was also able to afford a handful of cruisers and destroyers. With the cruiser fleet consisting of a number of powerful armoured cruisers and a mixed bag of protected cruisers whose average speed wasn't that dissimilar to that of a period battleship, a new type was under consideration. Although labelled as a scout cruiser, the rationale was very different to that which led to ships of the same designation being built in Europe. For the US, the aftermath of the war with Spain had left them with a single potential scenario looming over all other considerations: a potential European navy coming over the Atlantic to seize something deleterious to US interests, either a nearby island to base themselves from, or some part of the US mainland. The problem was that even with the post-war cash boom, the US Atlantic Fleet was still badly outnumbered by the readily deployable forces of quite a number of European navies, and so any invasion force would need to be met at sea. Ideally, the US Navy would have enough warning to bring over the ships from the Pacific, but since this scenario predates the Panama Canal, that couldn't be guaranteed. So at the very minimum, they needed to hit the incoming forces while they were still tied to their transport ships, hence while they were still at sea, which would limit their capability to bring their own ships to bear as they'd be tied to an escort formation. And if this couldn't be done, they needed to be engaged right after they'd arrived at their destination, ideally before any landings could actually get underway. But to engage an enemy fleet, who could be anywhere in the North Atlantic or the Caribbean, the US Navy first needed to find that enemy, and then let the rest of the fleet know where it was. The recent advent of ship-based radios seemed to offer a solution to the latter problem, and a fast scouting cruiser to get eyes on the enemy in the first place, obviously equipped with radio, seemed to offer a solution to the first issue. Fleet exercises held in 1902 and 1903 confirmed the utility of radio, but also confirmed the abysmally slow state of the existing cruiser fleet, with only the USS Olympia, one of the fastest cruisers, proving to be of all that much use in the scouting role, and of course there was only one of her. So it was decided to build a small class of 3 ships. They would be designed to take on only enemy small craft such as torpedo boats, since their job was primarily reconnaissance and not so much combat. As such, the new ships, Chester, Birmingham and Salem, were supposed to carry a dozen 3-inch guns and a couple of submerged torpedo tubes, with a 1.5-inch protected deck to keep out small caliber shells, with speed set at 24 knots, which was about as fast as they reckoned a small cruiser could go with vertical triple expansion engines. But quite literally everything about that specification was quickly changed. Protection moved to a choice between either armoured bulkheads with the coal bunkers and basic hull plating outboard of them, or a tall external 2-inch thick belt, which was enough to repel destroyer gunfire. The latter was chosen on the grounds that the bulkhead, although theoretically offering slightly better protection, would have to be pierced with scuttles to allow the coal to be accessed, and these couldn't be guaranteed to be watertight, at which point an enemy ship might pepper the outside of the hull, cause flooding, and then this could leak through the protection. The power plant was turned into something of an experiment, with Chester receiving Parsons turbines, which ran 4 screws at 23,000 shaft horsepower. Salem got Curtiss turbines with almost 24,000 shaft horsepower driving 2 screws, and Birmingham had 16,000 indicated horsepower vertical triple expansion engines driving 2 screws. This would give speeds of 26.5, 26 and 24.3 knots respectively on trials. Final displacement for the class was about 3,750 tons normal, although of course it varied slightly ship by ship. The deployment of other nations' scout cruisers and some new destroyers having larger guns also saw the armament changed to incorporate a pair of 5-inch guns, one fore and one aft, leaving just 6 3-inch guns, plus the torpedo tubes. The 3-inch guns were mounted on the wings, with 2 on deck each side and 1 in a sponson. The presence of a pair of 3-pounders saluting guns placed behind each of the 5-inch guns sometimes causes confusion, especially since the aftmost 3-inch guns aren't easy to spot on most photos, usually being obscured by boats. Later in their careers, the 5-inch guns and 2 of the 3-inch guns were removed and 4 newer 5-inch guns were installed in their place. Laid down in 1905, launched in 1907, and commissioned in 1908, the three ships were unfortunately already mostly obsolete when they entered service. The advent of faster and more heavily armed destroyers, newer and faster cruisers, and worst of all battle cruisers, rendered them extremely vulnerable at the speeds they were capable of. But they were about the only things the US Navy had for scouting, so they were retained for the moment. With that said, they did have some interesting experiences. Chester and Salem escorted the liner Carpathia to New York after she'd rescued survivors from the Titanic. Chester would go on to be a major part of the occupation of Veracruz and almost managed to ram a U-boat while she was on convoy escort duty in World War I. Salem patrolled the Mexican coast during the same time that Chester was occupying it, before she received new turbines and was then sent on anti-submarine patrols during World War I. Birmingham got into the Hall of Fame when Eugene Ely made the first takeoff from a warship in an aircraft in 1910, launching off of a deck that was built over the ship's bow. During World War I, she escorted a number of troop convoys, but with the end of the war, the whole class was seen as utterly obsolete, and with the construction of the Omaha class underway, all three ships were decommissioned at the start of the 1920s, with the ships remaining in the reserve fleet until they were scrapped in 1930.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.